What if you knew that the evolution of the human species is accelerating right now, and that you have a vital role to play? And what if you learned how to create a big, bright, beautiful, sexy, abundant life and heal the world, all in the same motion? This is The Evolutionary, accelerating personal evolution and inciting global transformation to propel us into the age of miracles. Hello and welcome to The Evolutionary. My name is David Knox and I am still your host. And welcome to Solocast 6, which I've given the fantastic title, Magic, Miracles, and a Massive Conspiracy. And today wraps up a topic that we started in Solocast 4, specifically walking through the 7 factors that make this a very special time in human history, a time when the accelerated, intentional, holistic evolution and consciousness expansion of a very few people can have a powerful, unstoppable, up-leveling impact on the collective of humanity and the subsequent healing of the planet. And to reiterate something that we covered in earlier episodes, this is important for us to understand because it helps give us reason to believe that our individual evolution and consciousness expansion is of the utmost importance to the survival of our species, which gives us the impetus for action. And that action is to engage in finding our own highly unique evolutionary path, accelerating along that path, and then sharing our new, upgraded, and ever-emergent beingness, if that makes sense, out into the collective. This will not only have a tremendous positive impact on the evolution of the species and the healing of the world, it will allow us each to live that big, bright, beautiful, sexy, abundant life that we desire. So that's the basic idea behind the evolutionary, and today we're talking about the final 2 factors that create this special time in human history, and these 2 are huge. In fact, they're the factors that really bring it home because they're fantastic and mystical, but they're real as fuck, as the kids say. So anyone who is open to them and willing to pay close attention to what's happening in their life and maybe see it through the lens of an expanded and expanding worldview will see these factors operating in the world plain as day. But before we get into them, here's a brief recap of the first 5 factors. Factor number 1 is called the edge of an epoch. And it's the observation that we are currently at the edge of a historical plateau, or epoch, where all of our systems have failed to bring us into harmony with each other and with our environment. And because of that failure and the resulting global crises of war and division and ecological destruction, our systems are all highly unstable and our entire society is ready for change. At such times in history is when the consciousness expansion of the minority, specifically those people expanding the frontiers of human consciousness, takes precedent and incites the up-leveling of the collective, which is all to say that we're at the doorstep of the Second Renaissance, something historians will probably refer to as the Age of Miracles, if I have anything to do with it, a time when humans learn to use the self to create and recreate their worlds at will. It will be a historical inflection point whose significance is greater than the advent of fire, agriculture, or even the printing press. Factor number 2 is called, it's not a democracy. The reason that an evolved minority can have this level of impact on the collective is that the consciousness of the collective is not determined through some sort of democratic process where everyone gets equal say. It's more like a system of light where each of us have an unlimited opportunity to contribute as much light as we can generate, as much energy as we can generate. And with so many people waking up so quickly on this planet, the change has already started and a massive shift is underway. The only question is, how fast can we do this? Factor number 3 is the fact that we're living in the information age. This is incredibly powerful because as people find various unique methodologies for inciting their own evolution, they can share those ideas out, and others can pick them up to help them accelerate also. So this is serving to accelerate changes in the collective worldview. It used to be that new ways of viewing our reality had to wait for those who were in positions of esteem and authority, and therefore invested in the status quo, to literally die off so that the new generation of thinkers could liberate humanity into a new way of seeing the world. Well, the information age is accelerating this process, putting tremendous intra-generational pressure on old worldviews and ways of being that don't serve us anymore. One of the most pragmatic mechanisms for this is the emergence of so many people becoming self-taught experts, thought leaders, researchers, and inventors. These people are reimagining and reinventing our world right now. Factor number 4 is called nature abhors devolution, and is a natural consequence of the fact that we live in an evolutionary universe. Which means the natural motion of the universe is to evolve itself holistically and with intention. This means that while devolution sometimes happens, it only happens as a last resort, especially with respect to consciousness. Life on Earth has finally produced sentient beings capable of engaging in conscious, intentional creation. That's us, by the way. The universal mind is not going to toss that progress out and start over unless it has no other choice. It will pull out all of the stops to continue the evolution of our species, and one of the next possible and transformative evolutionary steps for us is to develop the capacity to perceive unity. Not understand unity, but perceive unity, which will bring us naturally into harmony and balance with each other and with our environment. Factor number 5 is called morphic resonance, and it's based on the theory of the same name put forth by Rupert Sheldrake. And it starts with the idea that physical forms, especially biological life forms, are organized and operated by a field of energy that we call the morphic field. We each have one, and it's nested in the morphic field of the collective. As we evolve ourselves, that information and energy resonates into the field of the collective and informs changes to its signature and configuration, which is, in effect, the process of evolution. And this process can be accelerated exponentially by you and I becoming aware of it and learning how to modify our own morphic fields, and then learning how to skillfully amplify that energetic signature out into the morphic field of the collective. And this brings us up to the current and to factor number 6. And factor number 6 has the audacious title, Magic and Miracles. Now you may be wondering why the F I would want to talk about magic and miracles in what I've posed to be a discussion aimed at giving intelligent people the rational basis to have hope for humanity. Yet here I am talking about magic and miracles, which admittedly doesn't seem very rational. Well, the first thing I would say is to remember one of the most famous axioms from Arthur C. Clarke, and I think most people have heard this one. He said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So remember, most technology that we take for granted today was science fiction 50 to 100 years ago, and if you showed it to someone much farther back than that, it would be perceived as flat-out magic. So when we talk about magic, we're usually just talking about sufficiently advanced technology. Well then, let's look at the etymology of the word technology. It comes from the Greek word technologia, meaning systematic treatment. But the root of technologia is techne, meaning art or craft. It's the same root as the word technique. And so technology can be thought of as a systematic treatment or process with a high level of craft or art. So then, if we take the idea of technology and expand its application beyond just gadgets and computers and physical tools to how we operate ourselves, meaning how we operate our mind, our emotions, our voice, our bodies, and how we invest our time and attention, then we could think of it as the technology of the human self. So then, if that technology were sufficiently advanced, the result of the utilization of that technology would be indistinguishable from magic. And that is exactly what we're seeing in our society today. We're seeing the proliferation of mutants and mystics who seem to be defying the laws of nature. Only nowadays they are happy to tell us how they did it, so that we can do it too. More on that in a minute, but first, let's ask this question. If our human beingness and how we use it is akin to technology, are we getting the most out of this technology? This is, of course, the question at the heart of the human potential movement that we're in the midst of right now. And it's an important question because just because we own a technology doesn't mean we know how to use it. For instance, when my mom comes to town, she literally calls me on her $800 iPhone with a pencil and a piece of paper in her hand and asks me directions to my house. Yeah, she has my address. She doesn't know how to use her maps function. She's terrified of technology. So despite the best efforts of me and my siblings, she refuses to learn how to use any of her apps. Similarly, many people are ignorant of, resistant to, or even fearful of the technology of the human self. There could be multiple reasons for this. It could be because the emergence of the technology of the human self would dismantle their worldview. You see, higher expressions of the technology of the human self doesn't fit into the mechanistic, materialist, rational worldview that most of us were raised into. You know, the one where we're all just insignificant, hairless primates trying not to kill ourselves off. So if someone is holding on to that old worldview, they won't be open to learning how to use the more advanced features of the human self because it would be threatening to their worldview. Another reason someone might be resistant to this technology is that the advanced utilization of this technology requires us to make modifications to how we operate it, meaning how we operate ourselves. You know, what we think, feel, do, and say, and where we put our time and attention. This is, of course, the sticking point for most people, because it's become a habit of most human beings to defend their habits and lifestyle with an irrational tenacity. This, like everything else in our world, is changing, however. And the good news is that more and more people are becoming very interested in these emerging technologies and are willing to do the work to make the changes to how they operate their lives in order to get maximum utility from this technology. In fact, I dare say it's becoming fashionable to learn to use these technologies and to put them to use in our life. And this is a very good development because it's serving to accelerate our evolution. And there are lots and lots of examples of the advancement of the technologies of the human self that are showing up all over the world today. And because of the information age, these techniques or technologies are propagating quickly through the population. So let's look at a few examples. Probably the most talked about example is spontaneous healings. Spontaneous healings are proliferating all over the world today. In fact, 20 years ago, they used to have a different name. Do you remember this? They used to be called miraculous healings, but now they happen so often that they had to be renamed. You see, the word spontaneous allows the mainstream to talk about these events without letting God into the conversation, I guess. And they have to talk about them because they're happening so often, way too often to ignore. This is very good news, by the way, because it means these types of healings can no longer be tossed out as statistical outliers. And it is happening in large part due to the refinement and teaching of techniques and protocols designed specifically to cultivate miraculous, now called spontaneous healings. In modern times, Louise Hay should probably be credited with bringing spiritual yet non-denominational healing techniques into the popular culture when she published her seminal book, You Can Heal Your Life, and subsequently started Hay House, which has become a giant in the publishing world. Bruce Lipton also started teaching what he called the biology of belief shortly thereafter. And since then, many others have not only increased the popularity of these practices, but also developed and refined techniques to gain better results for more people. Notably, Joe Dispenza and Lynn McTaggart have each created processes that can be taught to the layperson, and they are garnering amazing results all around the world. Dispenza teaches a meditation-based process using visualization and techniques for blending convergent and divergent focus and the blessings of the chakra centers to create and call in the feeling and subsequently the experience of perfect health. Lynn McTaggart discovered a process for using groups of meditators, focusing their intention on healing one of the people in that group. In both cases, spontaneous healings are rampant. Thousands of people have undergone these trainings, and the parade of healings that baffle Western doctors just keeps getting longer. Now, we're talking regaining eyesight and hearing and being able to walk again and healing from all stages and types of cancer, etc., etc. It just goes on and on. It's a deluge. But as science slowly comes around to studying these phenomena, we can more quickly start to demystify them and make them accessible to all walks of life. And more importantly, we can start to utilize these techniques as mainstream healing modalities. Okay, let's look at a couple of other technologies of the human self. Many of you have heard of Wim Hof. He's a Dutch extreme athlete who has shaken the scientific world. He has not only discovered a method for using his breath and his will to keep his body temperature from dropping in conditions of extreme cold, but he's developed a superhuman immune system. But what is most incredible about Wim Hof is that he says he can teach anyone to do the same, and regularly does just that. In fact, not long ago he took a group of volunteers and trained them for only 4 days, after which they hiked to the top of a mountain in a blizzard in just their shorts and boots and gloves. Nobody died. In fact, nobody even got a cold. This is incredible, but it gets even better and weirder. Because then, as part of an experiment to prove the efficacy of the technique, they all went to a medical facility and got injected with E. coli. Yeah, E. coli. And all of them not only kept the symptoms of the pathogen from expressing, but they were tested again very shortly after and had no trace of the pathogen remaining in their blood. And of course, they filmed the whole thing. You can probably find it on YouTube. And I'd also say that Wim Hof himself has been the subject of many scientific studies. Now, this appears to be very magical, but fortunately Wim Hof is not interested in being a circus sideshow. He's interested in helping humanity and is willing to divulge his technique to the world. And he's done just that. In fact, the Wim Hof ice plunge has become an incredibly popular tool or technique for boosting immune system function and is getting positive results everywhere. Let's look at another example. Perhaps you've heard of CE5. This stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is human-initiated extraterrestrial contact. Yes, you heard that right. The CE5 technology was developed by Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Greer became a prominent public figure when he led something called the Disclosure Project in 1999, where he paraded a mass of very credible witnesses before a congressional committee to testify regarding their experiences with UFOs. The idea was to incite Congress to disclose everything that we know as a nation about UFOs and alien contact. Well, it didn't work, probably because Congress doesn't have any control over the agencies who actually protect that knowledge. But nonetheless, Dr. Greer has become one of the leading ufologists in the world, and his mission has become the teaching of a technology of the human self that he himself developed for making contact with extraterrestrial entities. He calls it CE5, which again is short for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. This is human-initiated contact. Dr. Greer utilizes a specific protocol involving a group meditation technique in combination with specific sounds and lights to invite alien entities to make contact. Now, if you haven't heard of this, you might be feeling incredulous right now. If that's the case, I encourage you to do the research. The number of people who have had success with this process is large and growing. And for Dr. Greer personally, he has led literally hundreds of CE5 groups all over the world for the last few decades. And check this out. They have never not had an encounter of some kind with a UFO or an entity or some other strange, inexplicable occurrence in their group, and they've documented all of it. Now CE5 groups are springing up all over the world and reporting similar results. In fact, I have a friend who participated in a CE5 group this summer and promptly posted some super cool footage on Facebook. I have yet to participate in a CE5 group myself, but I'm excited to do so soon. So if anyone is planning one anywhere in the Great Northwest, please reach out to me, as I'd love to take part. And actually, me and my partner are going traveling this winter and spring, so we would be interested in CE5 events anywhere in the southern United States too. Another example of the technology of the human self that I guess I should mention briefly is the work that you and I are doing here with the creation of the evolutionary. It's a refinement of the processes taught in the various flavors of what many people would consider the passé law of attraction, as well as the blending of the new scientific worldview of unified physics and the integration of what I call the primacy of the evolutionary imperative, which is the observation that the thing the universe seems most concerned with for itself and for everything in it is our evolution. Taking this into account, we can dial in our manifestation practices and gain traction in everything that we're working to create. And we do this by learning how to utilize our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions to cultivate an open and active dialogue with the universal mind. And then meshing the direction that we get from that conversation with our desires to help direct where we invest our time and attention. And as mentioned several times this season, we'll get into the specifics regarding that process in the second half of the season when we dive into the section called The Evolutionary Dynamic. And there are so many other ways that the advancement of the technology of the human self is showing up in our society today. People are learning techniques for remote viewing, channeling, mediumship, telepathy, galactic contact, breatharianism, and so many more. It's truly an amazing time to be in human form on this earth. Okay, so that's the bulk of factor number 6. But before we go on, I just want to make a note here about the popular notion of flow state, because it's really the same thing. Flow is a buzzword in pop culture right now, and it's a good thing. Flow state is an altered state of mind that we can achieve when we engage in an activity wherein we lose track of time, and in fact, we lose touch with our very sense of self, and things feel effortless, and there's a richness to the experience. Flow state is a state where reaction time decreases and intuition increases as linear thought is replaced with an instantaneous holistic knowing. It's a state from which impossible problems are solved, artistic masterpieces are created, and scientific breakthroughs emerge. In fact, insights in any area can be accessed through this state. Also, physical capacity and accomplishment often approach superhuman levels when we go into flow. Learning to intentionally get into flow state has untold utility for changing our lives and changing our world. There's a book on this subject called Stealing Fire that I highly recommend. Anyway, this is also a topic that we'll be discussing when we get into the evolutionary dynamic, coming soon. Okay, so something you may have noticed is that all of these things boil down to accessing and cultivating our connection with Source, or higher intelligence, or the field, or whatever you like to call it. So this is a very exciting time to be alive, because what this represents is not only a bunch of utility that is becoming available to us by learning to use the technology that we have inherent in our human beingness, but it also represents the removal of the ruling or priestly class as the mediators between the individual and the divine. This has been one of the darkest conspiracies against the individual in recorded human history, and it's been pretty pervasive. But the mysteries are now being shared and compared and practiced and refined, and they're becoming available to the masses. Those who kept these secrets in the past may have been keeping them out of greed, or because they didn't think the general population could be trusted with this power. However, there's a problem with that approach. You see, when very few people hold such knowledge, we end up with very little recourse when that knowledge falls into the wrong hands. There's many, many examples of this throughout history, but probably the classic example would be the rise of Nazi Germany. You see, when only a few people know about this technology, we are at great risk when someone goes rogue like Hitler did, when he was able to hijack the human technology, aka the creative energies of the masses. And with only a handful of light workers on the planet at the time, they were not able to offset those masses of people blindly giving their power over to a dark dictator. However, as our society evolves and more of us are trained in the technologies of the self, we'll be able to effortlessly redirect energies away from those who would misuse it. And on the level of the individual, anyone who is trained in the use of their own human technology would never hand over their power to anyone, much less someone spewing hatred and division. Also, one of my main contentions in this work is that the vast, overwhelming majority of humans are inherently good. If the secrets of the technology of the human self were not a secret at all, there would be more than enough mutants and masters wielding these powers with light and love to avert such madness before it ever took hold, which hints at the beauty of our current historical moment. We can actually change the world quickly and thoroughly through the technology of the self. Imagine, for instance, 1,000,000 powerful manifestors sending love and healing to a despotic dictator and simultaneously intending enlightened leadership to come into place. We've already proven scientifically through McTaggart's work and the work of others that group intention can reshape reality. As we each become more practiced and powerful, and as our numbers grow, there's no telling what we can create together or what we can heal together. What's more, even as learning these technologies constitutes an evolution in and of itself, we can then utilize that new skill set on our continued evolution to guide and accelerate it. Anyway, I look forward to seeing the dramatic increase in numbers of mutants and masters utilizing these technologies of the human self with high levels of skill, and I also look forward to all of the new techniques that will be discovered and brought forth that yield even more miraculous results. Then, ultimately, I look forward to the normalization of these practices in our society. Okay, let's shift toward factor number 7, which also has an audacious title. It's called A Massive Conspiracy. So, if you're a materialist and you're somehow still listening, first of all, congratulations. And secondly, something must be bothering you about factor number 6. Even though I've tried to make that section more palatable for the materialist by explaining that magic is just sufficiently advanced technology, there's still a big mystery at play here. And here's what I mean. When we employ a technique to enter a state that allows us to create amazing works, solve complex problems, know stuff we shouldn't know, accomplish impossible feats, open to contact from higher intelligence, call in synchronicities, etc., etc., we are clearly tapping into something that is beyond ourselves, something unseen, something mysterious and elusive. But this is so ubiquitously reported in the human experience and such a vital and recognized component of so many major discoveries and inventions that there must be something to it. And all of this leads to the inevitable conclusion that a higher mind is involved. And if you've ever watched with quiet fascination as circumstances and synchronicities were orchestrated all around you to bring about exactly what you needed in your life at exactly the right time, then you also know without any question that this higher mind operates from a place of benevolent and loving intention. In other words, it's here to help. So that's it. That's factor number 7. We have help. And whether you think that help is coming from God or Buddha or Brahman or Jesus or Allah or Eloah or Elohim or Sophia or Isis or Osiris or from the Syrians or the Palladians or the Arcturians or from your spirit guides or angels or Mother Nature or from the Force or from all of the above, it doesn't matter. The fact is we have help and plenty of it. But this true source, the universal mind, is a total mystery. This is the most simple and yet the most powerful of all of the 7 factors. This is, in fact, the only one that really matters because this is the factor that is orchestrating the other 6. And it's operating at every single level and in every single way you can imagine, and more. So, if you pay attention to the right things, you can see that in our world and in our lives, that higher powers are conspiring to incite the acceleration of human evolution right now. And this could be manifesting in many ways. It could be through the right information reaching the right people at the right time to get them the evolutionary lessons they require. It may be the inspirations that abound on the planet every day that give people key insights into their lives and into the problems that they're working to solve for their communities or in their specific discipline. Or it could be the orchestration of events at every level in our society to create the perfect circumstances to lift up our collective awareness. Also, it could manifest as changes to our physical body, changes to our sensitivities and capabilities that seem to come out of nowhere. I look around and I see humans changing physically, intellectually, and emotionally, and rapidly. I see them developing superhuman and supernatural capabilities in large numbers. I see higher minds reaching into our realm and contacting those who are open enough to receive. I see some of the most brilliant people on the planet having experiences that would be considered supernatural and being willing to talk about them. I see those same people openly crediting higher source for their ideas and their discoveries. I see world events driving us hard to the point to where we have to change because the higher mind knows that we won't change unless we have to. And then I see it showing us the way out of this seemingly impossible predicament that we're in today. And there is a lot to do, but again, we have help. Our evolution as a species will be supported, informed, and empowered by the universal mind in all of its expressions. But for you and I, it starts with the evolution of the individual, which should then raise the question in your own mind, what is my part? This is a good question to ask, but don't get hung up on it. Just focus on finding your own path. The tactical part that you have to play in the healing of the world will be shown to you when you have been made ready to execute on it. And that role will change over time as you evolve, as your abilities change and increase. But the role that we can all start playing right now is to cultivate our vision for the world we want to create. The universal mind is aware of and ready to work with the visions that you and I hold in our head and in our heart. So send good ones. Okay, well, that's about all I have for this episode, so I think I'll end it here. But before I end, I want to just say that one of the most exciting things for me about this episode is that it wraps up our high-level review of the evolutionary framework, that model of understanding that will lead us straight into the evolutionary dynamic. I will, however, do one more Solocast before we get into the dynamic, which will be a quick summary of the framework. So look for that in Solocast 7, and then we'll get into the how-to section starting in Solocast 8. So with that, I thank you for listening today and remind you to cultivate your vision for your life, couched in your vision for the whole world, and hold on to that vision, no matter what society and the media and even your friends and family and workmates throw at you in the coming months and years. Be stubborn as fuck about this. The only difference between those who see their vision to fruition and those who don't is going to be perseverance. Thanks again for plugging me in today. I'll talk to you next time. If you'd like to learn more about The Evolutionary, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheEvolutionaryLife or on Instagram at TheEvolutionaryLife or on the interwebs at theevolutionary.life because .com is so last season. Thank you again so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff, and I'll talk to you next time.